Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 11 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. I've really liked episodes 8, 9, and 10, which is funny because several people have been commenting that in episodes 9, a bunch of people said on episode 9 that it was more filler. I was like, what? I feel like lots of stuff happened in episode 9. I talked for nearly 2 hours about it. But again, it was more about like the character development than it was for the actual plot progression. So maybe that's where the filler thing comes in. But then episode 10, I will say, someone, Matthew, I think on Patreon noted, they're like, this is more of the weaker episodes. I was like, yeah, episode 10 was fine. It was really cute, and it was more getting Asuka and Shinji's relationship developed, and then showing how sketchy Kaji is and all that. But it was, I think, one of the more maybe weaker episodes of the series so far, but it's setting stuff up. I said that in the last reaction. It's just setting stuff up. I feel like we're not to the halfway point yet of the season, but it's setting stuff up that's going to go down later. And so I still like the episode. There hasn't been an episode of Neon Genesis that I've disliked so far. They've all been really good. So that's exciting, but I'm recording this a little bit early. Not really. Episode 10 just came out on Patreon. Episode 9 came out on YouTube, so not too early. But I did have some comments that I wanted to talk about before we dive into episode 11. I'm really excited because usually this series has a thing where if things have been kind of like okay and chill, something crazy is about to happen. And I'm like, okay, fine. Let's see what this is. So NL commented about how in the past, Asuka has been more popular in the West, and Rei is really apparently popular in Japan. I can see that. I was like, this fiery redhead, of course Westerners would love her, right? And Rei being more like quiet and contemplative and psychologically like maybe more adept I could see the appeal. I definitely could see that. But I really liked what NL said about Studio Fantasia. So back in episode 9, when Asuka lands on one of the buildings that's destroyed it has a Studio Fantasia sign. I remember commenting on it in the reaction. And NL said that it's kind of like a little tongue-in-cheek inside joke in that Studio Fantasia was a now bankrupt animation company that was basically outsourcing work, that was being outsourced for work on Evangelion. And so it's kind of like a little tongue-in-cheek joke with the animators that this small, now bankrupt, collapsed animation studio is getting crushed by this giant Eva. I love that NL said it has probably nothing to do with tight deadlines and the fact that apparently Neon Genesis was chronically behind schedule during most of its production. I was like, I love when animation studios do those little inside jokes. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of my favorite animated films, and in that movie, in the original VHS copy that I think my grandparents still have, there's actually a number written on the brick wall, and it was actually the number to the Disney studios, to the animators, and one of the animators put it in there in the movie, and now of course it's been digitally erased, but I just love little inside jokes like that animators include in there. It's funny, right? Because most of the animators working on different productions are overworked and underpaid, so I think they have every right to put those jokes in there. But that was really cool. I'm glad you mentioned that. Cryptic Squid, we had a really cool conversation about how the Evas, this part here, the Evas being able to neutralize the AT field, and that's why they're pretty much preferred over other conventional means of military strategy, because the Evas can actually destroy the AT field, but in order to do so they have to get up close, hence the close combat angle. But so far the Evas have been the most effective at destroying the AT field to get to the Angels, and that's why they keep being used. But Cryptic Squid 1's comment was mainly about Rei versus Asuka versus Shinji, and that's kind of interesting. We talked about the ego, the id, and the super ego in the last episode, but the idea that each character, whether it's Rei, Asuka, or Shinji, they all have very similar issues surrounding them and growing up in this post-apocalyptic world, but they handle them with very different personalities and very different approaches. And we talked about the idea that Cryptic Squid said when they were younger, they related more to Asuka, and now that they're older, they relate more to Rei. And I can totally see that, because Asuka's so in your face and loud and outgoing and just there that you notice her very quickly. And Rei, at the moment, kind of fades into the background a little bit. But as we've seen with Rey's character, she's very, very nuanced, has emotions, has a complex psychology. She just doesn't know how to communicate and express herself, so it doesn't come out like it does with Asuka. So if you're a kid or if you're younger, I could easily see how Rey may come off as boring or robotic. And then once you get older and you can kind of like relate more to maybe Rey's struggles, you're like, oh no, she's not quite robotic. This is just her issues with communication. It's like, So I can definitely see how, depending on when you watch this show, your favorite characters or characters that you liked or understood may change over time. That was really cool. And then Clara Kuma. So there was a book that Rey was reading that was in German, and I didn't know what it said. And some people on Patreon were like, oh, you probably shouldn't know that. There's some spoilers in it. And I was like, oh, okay. But then Claire translated it, but the way that you translate it, Claire, I don't consider these things spoilers because there wasn't really anything that I got out of it that was contextualized. Just some like little maybe hints of things to come to watch for, but I didn't consider it a spoiler. So I'm glad you, Claire speaks German. So they were like, okay, I can translate a little bit, saying that the book that Rey was reading in German had bits and chunks of different things. So I'm like, oh, what an Easter egg. Like the creator's just including this. So like if you speak German or read it, you might get some Easter eggs out of this. Go for it. But one part was about language societies and how people are unable to eloquently express themselves without using Latin, French, or Italian origin languages, which is interesting because that doesn't include Japanese. So I found that odd that it was like the Latin tree, because there's different grammar trees and language trees, and you have like all the Latin languages over here, like English, French, Spanish, things like that. And then you have your Arabic languages, and then you have like Japanese, Chinese, those languages there. So that's an interesting thing. There's also, again, this was not a spoiler because all Claire said was the chemical structure of something. I was like, oh good, don't spoil me. Yay, awesome. And then there was something about bloodlines and some sketchy context about class systems. I'm like, well, that seems in line with Neon Genesis because we're talking about the angels and how NERV is kind of better than everybody else. So I'm like, okay, I can see how that would tie in perhaps. And then the last part, all Claire said was that it had to do with Luke 15:12. And I was like, okay. So I looked up Luke 15:12, and the main line of that is, Father, give me the share of property that falls to me. Give me what is mine. Oh, and that kind of ties to NERV too, right? And the idea of Gendo being like, I created this. I have the power in this situation. The Evas are my creation. I want to do this. And I'm guessing that Gendo's the lead behind the project. So he's the main guy that created everything, right? Or tamed the Evas or constructed them. We don't know enough about the Evas yet, but he's the mastermind behind it all, Gendo is. So I found that very interesting. So yeah, that's all I got. It only took me 7 minutes. We're doing great. But I'm pretty excited to get in episode 11 and see what all is going down. So I hope you all enjoy this reaction and discussion, but let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into it. We're going to start Neon Genesis Evangelion episode 11, and we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. This was a really interesting episode. I loved this. Okay. This was the first time I think we've had in a while with this series where it's been trying to get more. It feels like the series is starting to give us, the audience, as Shinji was asking questions, it's like the series is saying, okay, if you've been following this series and you've not been thinking about this in a while because we've been delving with these teenagers and their romance coming of age problems, now's maybe the time we need to get back into like the stuff with the Evangelions and the angels and questioning the themes and mystery of the story. So we took a detour. We took a detour to meet Asuka, to get her and Shinji's relationship set up, to get her character established. And now we're going to get back into the whole mystery of the Evas and everything. So here's some questions that maybe you should be thinking about as we move towards the middle of the series. But yeah, this episode, very curious. Very curious. I agree. I think that they did this whole... The question is, how did they divert power from the entirety of Tokyo 3. That seems like it would take some inside job stuff going on. I've got some theories, but we'll tackle them when we get to them. But there's lots of stuff I had to bring. As soon as we got to the credits, I was thinking while the song was playing, I was like, oh, I gotta bring Whiteboard Kun out because we've got so much stuff to kind of break down. So lots of things to break down in this thing here. So the first thing I want to do is say, okay, questions for the series at this point. Now, obviously, I don't want spoilers, but I'm going to put the questions that we as the audience are being asked to think about over here, right? And over here, we're going to talk about relationships and kind of where we're at there. Because, yeah, we got a nice little reminder. Well, it's weird because we got a nice little reminder that that Gendo's kind of the worst. He does not know how to parent. Does not know how to parent at all. But there's a moment, and we'll talk about it with Akagi, when she's trying to make Shinji feel better and basically trying to reassure Shinji that his father is not a complete piece of shit. So it's like, okay, we'll talk about that when we get to it. But there's a lot going on in this episode. A lot going on. So relationships, and I also want to talk about stuff with, we're going to put world building. We're going to put world building and strategies over here. So we have our three areas that we're going to kind of talk about. And I've conveniently made it, we've got Shinji, or Rei with the blue, Shinji with the purple, and Asuka with the red. Interestingly enough. So yeah, let's just dive into this episode, get past the OP here, and go through here. So one thing that I really like about this series, this episode starting out, is just, I love that it just goes into the mundane daily lives of Akagi and the other characters of NERV, because we've seen Misato's daily life up until this point, and we've seen Shinji and the school kids, but we don't really get to see what the adults are doing, the adults of NERV, like what is their day-to-day function. We've not really seen any of that. So this beginning of the episode kind of dives into that. We also, one thing with the symbolism is that they like to start out with power lines, and it's not the first time it's happened, so I didn't think two things about it, but it's funny that we have the opening here. The very first shot of the episode is a power line, and that's what the whole episode is about, is the fact that they don't have power. So electricity, we'll talk about electricity. Basically, electricity is key. Electricity is crucial in this world to do many things. It's not the end all be all, because there is, thank God for diesel generators, right? Thank God those exist. But it's so funny. This was released in 1997. This series came out in 97, and it's so true to life now. Where I work, we rely so much on computers and electricity to do everything for us. There was a day when our power went out and nobody could do their job. We all just sat there and we were like, well, we can't send this because we don't have electricity. We don't have a computer on. We can't enter this because the computer's not on. We can't go do that and process it because the computer's not on. Like, a lot of my day-to-day job relies on a computer. And if there's not electricity, I just don't have anything to do. So it's so relatable in this that they're kind of like, what do we do in this case if we don't have electricity? And they make it work. They power through it. And I love that this, again, the battle itself was a minute long, and it was all just building up to that battle. But I like that these characters, we see how each of them in their own way finds a means to make things work. And we'll talk about Misato. Poor Misato, she's usually the one gung-ho. She was trapped by Kaji in the elevator. We'll talk about that her and Kaji were stuck in the elevator. We'll talk about that. But it was really Akagi that came through in this episode. Akagi pulled her weight. She was like, no, we're going to do this. And Gendo too. So interestingly enough, we have mainly our guy that's voiced by Dio / Adam / Zeke here with the guitar. I like that he's the musician that works for NERV. And then we see the bicycle with the newspapers on it. And this guy and Akagi and them are at the laundromat. I like it. And they're all in their just regular clothes. They're not in their NERV clothes yet. So we mainly have the one guy and then the girl that works in the command center and Akagi doing their laundry. And there's this poster that says Moon beside it, which is funny because you have Misato, who's Sailor Moon. Also, it's interesting, the way that this laundry is done, it does look a little futuristic. And the conversation they're having is the most mundane adult conversation that you would imagine a laundromat. Akagi's like, boy, the cost of doing laundry has been killing me lately. Like, how much I have to spend. And then the one girl's like, I wish I had the time to wash my own clothes. So it's just a casual, everyday adult conversation. And then the guy comes in and says, well, you guys should appreciate the fact that you can at least sleep at home. So that establishes a couple of things. One, that Akagi maybe does not... NERV's not paying a lot. Let's put it this way. NERV is not a high-paying job, right? NERV is not a high-paying job because Akagi is talking about the fact that the laundry is eating up her budget. The one girl talks about that it's time-consuming. She doesn't have time to do her own laundry, which is why she goes to the laundromat. And the one guy notes that not everyone has a home. So it may be implied that he's like, at least you appreciate the fact you can at least sleep at home. So maybe that's referring to the fact that he's not where his actual home is. He moved to Tokyo 3 for the job. It could mean that. It could mean that he can't sleep at home. Maybe he's an insomniac. It could mean that he doesn't have a home. He's homeless. It could mean that the state of his house is not good, kind of like Ray. There's a lot of things you can apply, but it's just like the people working at NERV are not elitist, right? They're not the upper echelon. They're kind of like the worker ants of this corporation. It's, Gendo and Fuku-chan, but even Fuku-chan takes the public train. So it's really Gendo that's kind of your upper elite in all of this, right? But yeah, to take out the NERV card. So yeah, it's basically, Fuku-chan's not elite. He's riding the public train in the morning and has his newspaper and just kind of ignores them all. Like, oh, good morning, sir. And Akagi. And then these two are like, good morning. And they say it much more officially. He's like, oh, whatever. And so I like that Akagi sits next to Fuku-chan. And meanwhile, the other two like stand up and like hold on to the rail. And so we get this conversation. I love this. And Fuku says, I have to go up top in Ikari's place for the parent discussion. So Fuyu is going to the parent discussion, right? Because they're having some kind of council meeting today. And saying, isn't today the city council's regular meeting? It's a pointless job. That Ikari always thrusts the sundry tasks onto me. Without the Magi, I'd be lost. So we established that there is city elections coming up. City elections and a council meeting. Okay. This is where things get really interesting and talking about how democracy and stuff works in New Tokyo 3. It's fascinating. The city council is a shell. The municipal government is run by the Magi. So the government, is run by the Magi, and the council is just, it's a shell. It doesn't really it's just there for looks. And then the Magi, you mean the 3 supercomputers. So funny that they kept mentioning the Magi this whole time, and I was like, is that like a group of people? No, it's 3 supercomputers. Of course it is. And so he's like, government run by majority decision of 3 different computers, which is so bizarre. So it's basically that the majority decision of 3 forms of AI control the city government. And it's so bonkers, right? It's a system that is properly in line with the fundamentals of democracy. It is equal and fair and nonpartisan. That's so bonkers. That's so wild that it's basically just it in line. I love that. I love that term. In line with the fundamentals of democracy. I feel like the Joker from The Dark Knight. It's fair. Right? I feel like that. Like, you'd be talking to Harvey Dent being like, what's great about these 3 supercomputers? They're fair. It's like, haha. But yeah, that's such a wild concept, right? That these 3 forms of AI that in this futuristic post-apocalyptic world, they're like, things have gone to shit during the second impact. Things went to shit. Nobody could decide anything. It was mass panic, mass hysteria. So what the government decided to do was that, to be fair to everyone, we will just have these 3 computers decide all the governmental decisions. There's 3 of them, so if 2 of them disagree, one will be the tiebreaker, and we'll just go from there. And everybody was like, okay, cool. So it's like, is the city elections even a thing? It's basically saying they're pointless because the supercomputers are going to choose everything. It doesn't matter if there's that election. So when the one guy steals the campaigning van, I'm like, what's the point of the campaign van? The supercomputers are choosing everything, right? Maybe the people in New Tokyo 3 do get to vote. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe they get to vote, but maybe it's chosen by the supercomputers. Now the question is, it seems like the public doesn't know that the government's run by the MAGI, because the 2 that work at NERV even question it. They're like, oh, you mean the computers are running everything? Like, people just didn't know. So it could be possible that the population at large does not know about the MAGI, which is interesting. And when Fuku-chan's telling this story, he seems pretty okay. He's like just smiling about it, like, nope, this is just how it works. This is what we do. And the council just obeys their decision. So, okay, the council, it's the most efficient form of government. So yeah, the one girl's like, so the council is made up of actual people. Okay, so it's a shell, but there are actual people on the council. But the council listens to what the supercomputers say. Okay. And he's like, well, it's efficient. And that kind of ties in, too, back in episode 7, where we did the whole bureaucracy workaround, and nobody wanted, the buck didn't stop anywhere. It just kept being passed around to different people. Yeah, that makes total sense with this. Because it's just like, oh, well, we don't want to have to worry about these decisions. Us make decisions that benefit these people that are going to complain about it? No, let this computer do it. Let the computer make the decisions. We'll just sit here and not have to worry about it and not have to do anything. Oh, that's so great. I love that. I'm like, that's awesome. This sci-fi, getting into this. That's the city of science for you. Oh, I love it. So yeah, they established that Tokyo 3 is a city of science, which is hilarious because in this city of science, when everything is run by these computers that require electricity, when you pull the umbilical, when you pull the cord, you only got so much time before it all dies, right? It's a nice big metaphor for the EVAs too. It's like once the support plug is pulled on the EVAs, they've got 5 minutes, maybe a minute to 5 minutes to do something. And here we see that without the electricity and the computers and everything malfunctioning, they only have a limited amount of time to do anything before everything collapses. It's so good. An era where science reigns supreme. Talk about an old-fashioned line. Oh, that's really cool. I like the idea that he's like, it's old-fashioned to say the era of science. And if you think about it, yeah, that kind of does make sense because this is taking place in 2015, 2016. So it would make sense that the era of science was around before the second impact and now it's just expanded upon. I love that. That's great. Come to think of it, you're running an experiment on Unit 00, aren't you? Yeah, so they're trying to do another activation test. They're trying to get another test with Ray. Okay. And he's like, I'm looking forward to good news. Again, this episode had so many good transitions, so many good ones. And this was the first one. He goes, I hope we get good results. And it snaps to emergency, everything's going wrong. Fantastic. I love that transition so much. This series does amazing transitions. And so they're like, nope, stop the experiment. Things aren't going well. Get that out of there. Switch the circuits. And the power supply is being restored. Okay. And they're asking where the problem is. It's the conversion efficiency is 0.008 lower than our theoretical value, and that concerns me. It's barely within tolerance, though. But what do we do? So, like, and I like that it's such science fiction. Like, let's try it again and change the conversion rate and all of this. And let's recommence the reactivation experiment. I love the title, In the Still Darkness. There was 2 titles. The Day Tokyo 3 Stood Still is a good one, but I like In the Still Darkness. That's a good title. It's interesting. So let's talk about Misato. And he says, hey, hold up. Okay. I'm just watching this now, looking at her face where she's like, nope. Like, I don't want to talk to you. So let's talk about Misato and Kaji. Misato is over Kaji. I like that we set up in the first, and this is all in the span of, he showed up on the scene in episode 8, right? So this is episode 11. So in the span of episodes 8, 9, 10, and 11, we've come kind of full circle. So I'm going to put over in quotation marks. So Misato went from reuniting and reigniting this flame to realizing he has not changed at all and is still immature and a player, and she knows her feelings for him. She knows her feelings, but wants to move on. So yeah, Misato's just going through the motions. She's like, she got reunited with this guy that she once had a thing with and once had a relationship and loved maybe, and then realized that he's not changed at all. He's still immature. He's still the same player he was. And she's like, I'm over it. I want to be more mature than I was back then, so screw that. And she wants to move on. And he just can't let it go, right? He just keeps trying to get her back in his life. But here's the thing. Akagi later on in the episode theorizes that somebody was trying to infiltrate NERV and gather up information and turn the power off as a distraction and as a way to not be seen and just as a means of getting in and getting out without being noticed. I agree with Akagi. I think that's what's happening. And I think Kaji's in on it. I think Kaji and that woman he talked to in the last episode up in the car that was going across the mountain or whatever, I think that woman or someone that she works for are the ones infiltrating to get the information, and Kaji just set things up for the power. Either Kaji set things up for the power to go out, or he showed them where to go and they turned the power off before they infiltrated. But here's the thing. Kaji was very adamant about stopping her in the elevator because I think Kaji knew that Misato is extremely capable at her job. She's super capable. If there's a problem, she's able to handle it. So I feel that if Misato had been by herself in that elevator, she would have, she basically tried to figure out a way to get through it, right? But I feel like Misato would have maybe not been distracted by Kaji as much if she'd been by herself in the elevator. Maybe would have been able to get out and would have been able to help them get the Evas up and going faster, right? I think that Kaji got in that elevator thinking he was going to distract her or keep her from trying to escape or try to put the moves on her again or something, and then she was just not having it. So he didn't quite get what he wanted, but he was able to watch her and make sure she didn't leave the elevator to go help the others. That's what I think. I think Kaji was in on it to try to keep her there, and I think that Kaji is a double agent. I think Kaji is double agent working with someone to get NERV info. Now, the big question is, where does Gendo tie into that with the atom specimen? The atom specimen was fine because it was in a little suitcase that was self-contained and could power itself. So it was not reliant. Because when the power first went out, I went like, oh shit, that egg's going to hatch. The atom something's going to happen to it. Is it going to turn into an angel? What's going to happen? But then I thought about it as the episode was going on. I was like, no, it's in a self-contained suitcase. It's powered itself. It's like a little, liquid nitrogen thing. It's just self-contained. It doesn't need the electricity. It's like, okay, it's fine. So the question then is, where does Gendo fit into this? And then we'll talk about him and Shinji. Yeah. But yeah, I am fully in belief that Kaji got in that elevator to distract her and keep her from getting out and trying to help them with the Evas. Because he knows that Misato is very good at her job. And Misato's like, I just can't stand you. So, okay. The use of silence in this scene with Shinji and the phone is amazing. I was like, they linger on this phone and the conversation so long before anybody says anything. They're like, please hold for just a moment. And you see the telephone book up there, the telephone book, and then he's got the payphone, and it says, please hold for a moment. And they make you hold for a moment. They make you sit there and wait, like, nuh-uh, you're going to sit here and wait until... I didn't know who it was on the other end. And then we find out it's Gendo talking to Shinji. And yeah, they make you wait for a solid 10 seconds. Like a solid 10 seconds. Like, they make you wait a long time. And then the first thing out of his mouth is what? Father of the Year, y'all. And Shinji is like, father. And he says, what is it? Spit it out. I want to get a picture of poor Shinji looking like he's trying to think of what... He's come so far, right? He's come so far in 11 episodes. 11 episodes ago, our boy Shinji would have been like looking away, not saying a word, like not being able to confront his father. But here he is actively trying to have a conversation with his dad, and Gendo's being an asshole. So yeah, so Shinji is trying to get Gendo to come to the parent-teacher meeting, because that's what he's been... And there's part of me that's like, okay, Shinji probably knew, because he's suspected when Misato's like, that's part of my job. He probably knows that Misato is watching him under his dad's orders. He probably suspects that. But he didn't have to call Gendo to ask, but I feel like he wanted to talk to his dad. And Gendo's just the worst. And so, yeah, he's just clenching and he's shaking. He's like, well... And the whole time he's just sitting there, like, tensing his hand, like just anxious. Like, what do I do? He's like, actually, today, we were told to tell our parents that they're having a career discussion interview at school. And obviously, Shinji wants his dad to come because it's his dad. And then Gendo's like, well, I've delegated all such things to Captain Katsuragi. So Gendo doesn't even like beat around the bush. He doesn't even try to hide it. He's like, I've appointed Misato for all that. He's like, no. He's like, I'm not doing any of that parent-teacher nonsense. He's like, I told Misato to do all that for me. Like, he doesn't even beat around the bush. He just comes out and says it. And he says, don't call me over such nonsense. Don't forward any more of these calls to... And then it shuts off. And I like that Shinji's like, oh, that he didn't hang up. It just ended. The call just ended. It wasn't a hang up. We'll tie back to Gendo. I did want to note one thing. I rewatched episode 9. And in the conversation that Kaji has with Asuka, when they're talking about scuba diving, he's like, oh, well, the last time I went diving was 3 years ago. And the only reason I wanted to bring it up is because, thinking about Gendo and Shinji, 3 years ago is when Gendo the last time Gendo saw Shinji was 3 years ago. And since then, their conversation with one another has been tense and awkward and contrived. And so I thought it was just interesting timeline-wise that the last time Gendo saw Shinji was 3 years ago. The last time Kaji went diving was 3 years ago. Like, is there some kind of connection to that? Is there some meaning? Like, why didn't Kaji say 4 years ago or 2 years ago? You know, is there a connection between the 3 years there? So that's just something I've got in the back of my head going on while we're going through this. And so here's the thing, too, that's also suspicious, is that the moment that the power shuts off, Kaji says, oh, is it a blackout? And Misato's like, no, that's not possible. Like, that's the first thing he went to. Someone in the comments said that Kaji is a walking red flag. And I'm like, there's an SNL skit where it's got Kirsten Wiig in it, and she's like walking around, and she's in there like, red flag. I was like, I just feel like every time I see Kaji on the screen, I'm like, red flag. Like, just... But yeah, how would he instantly go to that? Yeah, and see, the moment after she says that's not possible, it blacks out. Now, you could say that Kaji's perceptive, and that he assumes the worst, and that Misato's assuming the best case scenario, and that she just doesn't think it's possible to give a blackout, or Kaji knows more than he's letting on, and knows exactly what this is. She's like, do you think there was an accident? He's like, maybe a Kagi messed up an experiment. Ha ha ha. And I love that right after that, we get that the Eva and everything shuts down and Kagi's like, I had nothing to do with this. I love that. She's like, it wasn't me. And I love it ties back to that. And then Misato's like, well, it'll switch up to backup power very soon. And they're like, no good. The backup circuits aren't connecting. So if we're going to, that's the first question is, how and why did the power go out? How and why? Because Misato is like, oh, there's a backup thing, and it didn't work. So someone that cut the power must have known about the backup, right? I'm thinking Kaji's involved because Kaji's been there long enough where he would have been able to go throughout NERV and figure all this stuff out and relay that information back to a third party who could go in and cut the power and infiltrate while it was out. So, again, but my thing about all of that is Gendo asked him to stay. Gendo asked him to stick around. So, either one of three things. Either Kaji is fooling Gendo and Gendo doesn't realize that Kaji is working for a third party and let him come in with the Atom unit and thinks that he's completely trustworthy and Gendo's and just being fooled. Two, Gendo is in on this and for some reason wants NERV to be infiltrated, but I don't know why they would. They've gone to such lengths to stop the competition. I don't think it's that one. Or Gendo believes that Kaji is trustworthy and Kaji's using the Atom unit kind of as like a peace offering. Maybe Kaji brought in the Atom specimen to be like, here you go, you can trust me, when that's really not the case. So I don't know. Gendo and Kaji know things that no one else does in this series at the moment, we think. So I'm curious to know if Kaji is a traitor and is giving information to outside parties, does Gendo know about it? Is he okay with it? Or does he not know about it? So, or does he know about it, doesn't like it, and he's just finding a way to catch Kaji in the act? We don't know. Gendo is a mysterious character in themselves. But Fuka-chan's like, which circuits are still functioning? And they're like a total of 1.2%. Only the old circuits from number 2, 5, 6, 7. So at the moment, there's only 1.2% of the circuits running. That's not a lot. That means that like 97.8 circuits are not, or 98.8 circuits are not running right. Like, nope, that's not good. And he says, route all remaining power supplies to maintain the Magi and central dogma. And central, so we get some terms thrown around here that they're like, okay, so they're like power the Magi and central dogma. Okay, whatever central dogma is, it's like, well, that's very pretentious. And the Dio guy says that will interfere with the life support systems. Okay, so that'll interfere with life support. I'm assuming for the Evas. Okay, and we'll say, is it for the Evas? We don't know. But yeah, it'll interfere. And he says, from there, I don't care. That's our top priority. He's like, no, we've got to keep the government in control. We've got to keep everything smoothly. And again, second transition that's amazing. It transitions to the stoplight that's like going on and off. And it says, aiming for a politics that everyone can love with truth and justice. Like, oh my God. Like, just that transition. It's great. And so then we cut to the one guy that works for NERV that says that Misato's a lazy slob. Can't she at least pick up her own laundry? I'm glad Shinji's not the only one that knows that Misato's a slob. Glad that Shinji's not the only one. It's also this guy with the glasses and the hair that kind of looks like Ace Attorney. Like a young version. Also, it's like all her red... Note to self, Misato has like 8 red jackets. She just has the same... She has multiples of the same outfit. I was like, she always wears that red jacket, but she's got multiples. And so, yeah, then everything stops. And so, as we're, again, little tiny things with the animation, as we go through this episode, as Asuka and Shinji and Rei are walking up to NERV, we see on the side of the road that says EVA socket, caution HV danger. And so it's like the socket straight ahead. It's like, okay, cool. And so I like that in the composition here, you have Asuka leading the way, because that's her. And then you have Shinji and Rei kind of closer together, back a little ways. And then Asuka saying, maybe Commander Ikari's just really busy. Maybe. And Shinji's like, I don't know. He's kind of a jerk. It wasn't like he hung up, but more like a mechanical failure. And then, so Asuka, my girl. If there's one thing that bothers me about Asuka is that she constantly tells Shinji he needs to be a man. And I'm like, girl. So we have Asuka, and she is constantly telling Shinji to man up all the live long day. All the time. And to the point where Shinji's just like, fine, whatever. And Rei just kind of looks at him. She's like, you are a man. Why don't you stop worrying about every little detail? And I like that Rei looks over to Shinji like, you won't keep taking this? I think Rei is fully expecting Shinji to just yell back at her at some point and be like, shut up. And I think Rei's just waiting for it to happen. But I love that these 14-year-olds, when they get to I like their reactions when they get to the gate where they swipe the card. Shinji's like, that didn't work. And Rei tries it and goes, that didn't work. And Asuka's like, get out of my way. And then she's like, this thing's defective. She's like, it's broken. She has the most instant, most intense reaction. She says it must be broken. Doesn't consider there might be something else wrong. It's like, nope, it is broken. That is the solution here. And so, meanwhile, we get the workers. I like that we cut to the workers opening the hatch to get to the Evas. That's really great. I like that we get to see what they're doing. And Akagi and the other girl come in. And let's hurry and get to the command center. It's been down for 7 minutes. Every minute counts. We need to make sure what's going on. And Misato, meanwhile, is kind of freaking out because she's like, clearly something's wrong. I'm stuck in this elevator with this guy. She says, this isn't normal. And Kaji's just like, he says, what's the power system here? So I like Kaji just fishing for information. Oh, hey, while the power's out, how about you tell me, what is the power system here? How does it work? And she says there are 3 systems, the main, sub, and reserve. So kind of there's the 3 magi. There's the 3 systems. There's the main, the sub, and the reserve power. Okay. So yeah, as she's sitting there trying to figure something out. It's unthinkable that all 3 would fail simultaneously. He's like, which means we should assume that the breakers didn't fail on their own. And we cut to Gendo. That moment. Yes. And you can see his eyes. They were taken down on purpose. And I like that as they're lighting the candles, Fuku has the lighter lighting the candles regardless of the cause. So can we assume that Fuku-chan smokes because he has the lighter? Or did they just find that lying around? And then I love he says, it would be disastrous if an angel struck right now. Be really bad if that happened. And meanwhile, you have this total green background. I love the colors. You have the secondary colors. You have the orange there with Fuku, and you have the green behind Gendo. Yeah, it'd be really bad if that happened. Meanwhile, radar's detected an unidentified object in the Atami region. Yep, it's an angel. It's the 8th one. Okay. And so we cut to the Fuchu General Supreme Command Center. It must be an angel. Okay, what are we going to do? And they're like, well, that's the procedure. Go to alert status. We got a protocol for this. And then they say this one's destination is going to be New Tokyo 3 anyway. They're like, we don't have to warn the civilians. It's going to the military base anyway. They'll take care of it. They've got this. They know what they're doing. And they say there's nothing we need to do. If it's just going to New Tokyo 3, let them take care of it. We don't have to do a single thing. We'll just sit back here and make sure everything goes according to plan. And this thing, other than the pyramid has some funky design to it. I'll be honest. I like the pyramid angel. This one's my second favorite. It may be my first favorite behind the pyramid or my second favorite. The daddy long legs with the body with all the eyes and shooting out and crying acid. What? It's the most bizarre design, and I kind of love it. But yeah, the angel has landed, and it's still advancing. What about New Tokyo 3? And they're not answering. And I love that they're just, like, lighting putting the cigarette out. What are those NERV guys doing? And then, yeah, the gangway ladders were decorative holdovers from the past, but glad we needed them. Yeah, so Kagi's climbing up the ladder and is like, man, I thought these were just going to be decorative, but glad we had them. And I feel like after this, NERV is going to do like a complete overhaul to make sure that every proper measure is in place to ensure that this doesn't happen again, or that they're better prepared for it. To prepare is to prevent. That line there, like, it's, prepare for what's going to happen to prevent a catastrophe. Indeed. Interesting. So then I like the angle, again, we did the camera angle of Asuka trying to, like, see what's up and saying this one doesn't work either. None of the facilities work. This is odd. Does that mean something's happened down below? It would be natural to assume that. And so the three of them decide they need to make it to NERV headquarters. And Misato, meanwhile, is like, good. No good. The emergency phones aren't getting through either. Like, they're just completely cut off. Okay, so we're just going through the motions of everything that's gone wrong. And they're just like, everything is just messing up. Even the wireless phones. Even the cordless ones. My dog is, like, scratching. And so then they're like, what do we do? And Ray goes, pull out the emergency manual. It's just like the simplest little thing. And of course, Asuka, because she wants to compete with Ray, is like, I have my emergency manual, and like gets it out as well. And Shinji's like, what are we doing? And so they start reading that, and he's like, what's going on? And she's like, what are you, stupid? It's the emergency manual. I like that Shinji goes to Asuka to ask, right? And for emergencies only. And then Ray reads it for like 2 seconds while they're bickering. She's like, okay, nope, found out. Let's go to the headquarters. We're good. And because Asuka's 14 and kind of immature, she says we have to decide on a group leader. And I like that Ray and Shinji are like, what? And she's like, naturally, I'm the leader. And no objections, I assume. And Shinji's like, I'm not arguing with you. And Ray's like, this is pointless. And so then, yeah, she's like, all right, let's go. And Ray's like, we need to go that way. Like, Ray just is naturally knows what's up. And Asuka's like, but the doors don't work. And so then, of course, they make Shinji open it manually because he's the man, right? And I love it. He's like, you only rely on people at times like this. Yeah, I love that she uses Shinji because he's the man. He's got the muscle, right? Oh my gosh. And the poses of all of them, like, she always is in this, like, superhero pose. And Ray's always just like, it's great. I really liked Ray in this episode. And so then, yeah, meanwhile, the council, they only rely on us. What does the government say? The bastards in Tokyo 2, they're apparently getting ready to run. So, okay, I wonder if the Tokyo 3 government with the Magi is just, the computers are only for Tokyo 3. Because they say in Tokyo 2, everybody is preparing to, like, abandon ship. They are preparing to run. They're ready to evacuate with this whole angel deal. They're like, if they can't stop it, we're all screwed. So, curious. And then meanwhile, I like that we have, as this giant daddy longlegs is approaching Tokyo 3, we have the little sign that says, beware of forest fires. Like, that's the worst thing we have to worry about, are the forest fires. The angel is active and advancing. And like, fine, get in contact with NERV. And like, how? By going there. Like, since they won't respond to our communication, we need to go to them. And so then they fly overhead and announce that the angel's coming. And that's when the guy with the glasses is like, I gotta get back to base and report it to Misato. I gotta go. How am I gonna do it? And that's when he sees the campaigning van. The van that's like, remember, Takahashi remains calm even in situations like this. Please support candidate Takahashi. And he's like, lucky, I'll do that. So it's funny they have this campaign van when we've established that the Magi kind of run the government. That's very curious. And he's like, I'll just use that. So we cut back to Misato in the elevator, being hot and being like, the air conditioner's out too. And Kaji, meanwhile, Kaji's just standing there, cool as a cucumber, hands behind his back, no problems here, being suspicious and saying, oh, if you're so hot, why don't you take off your shirt? Like, and she's like, no, He's like, there's no reason for shyness between you and me. And she's like, nope, bye. Kaji, I don't feel bad for Kaji because he brings us all on himself. He's like, oh, there's no need for shyness between the two of us. You could just, get naked and make out with me while we're stuck in this elevator. And she's like, screw that. No, I don't need you. So yeah, she's just trying to be over Kaji as much as she can be. I feel for Misato. She's like, don't get any funny ideas just because we're in this situation. And he's like, fine. Like, oh, red flag. And so, yeah, even Kage and them are like, the air's getting stagnant. And that's like the nastiest feeling, is if you're in a building and it's just lukewarm and hot. It's gross. And then Akagi, to think this facility represents the most advanced technology on Earth. And they're like, but look at the commander and vice commander. The heat's not getting them to them at all. Because their souls are black and they have nothing inside of them that is warm. It looks like a freaking seance. You like go over there to them and like both Gendo and Fuku-chan's eyes are like blacked out and there's these like dimly lit orange-red candles surrounding them. They look like they're getting ready to sacrifice someone and like spill their blood upon the table. No. Oh my God. Just insanity. And then for fire prevention. And so meanwhile, they're keeping cool, but they have their legs in the bucket of water. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a little bit of a facade, right? And he says it's lukewarm. Yeah. Oh my God. What craziness, right? The day Tokyo 3 stood still. Mm-hmm. I love this. I love that as this Daddy Longlegs is getting closer to NERV, the campaign van, they're like, pursuant to the declaration of a state of emergency in this district. Mm-hmm. I love it. Excuse me that. And then they're like, just go through the barricade. It's fine. And the girl's like, oh my God, it's an emergency. And they just crash through it. I love it. I love it. The Geofront was designed to be a self-sufficient colony, even when isolated from the outside. Theoretically, it's impossible for all the power sources to fail at once. And this is when they're like, okay, we designed this place to be self-sustaining and to not need any help from the rest of Japan. So that means that someone deliberately turned the power off to investigate the facility so they could determine the structure through the progress of restoration. Yeah, so they're like, while the power's kicking back on and everything is getting back to full steam, they're going to gather as much info as they can and get out. Disrespectful bastards. And then I like that Akagi's like, fine, I'll run a dummy program through the Magi to get it back going. It'll make it harder for them to get a complete picture. Okay. She's like, I'll solve it. I love that the flame is like almost blue, but then it becomes red. It's kind of like Rei going into Asuka and like, and you could see Gendo's eyes through the glasses. The first havoc wreaked upon our headquarters wasn't caused by an angel, but by another member of our species. It just goes to show, ultimately, the enemy of mankind is mankind. Yeah, so... Gendo talks about the enemy of man is man. So where does the Evas and angels fall into place? That's the question. If Gendo believes that the enemy of mankind is mankind, that we're our worst enemy, then where do the angels and Evas fall into this? So, but I love that you can see his eyes, meaning that he's probably being truthful, because anytime Gendo has been either lying or secretive, we don't see his eyes, but we see them here. Mm-hmm. This would normally only take 2 minutes. And they ask if it's a quarter. Okay. So once we should be able to come out in the Geofront. Okay, so yeah, they're trying to trek through. And so, yeah, and then Asuka's just like, you're a nitpicky man. He's like, you're always focusing on the stupidest things. And Rei's like, be quiet. And so Asuka calling Rei Miss Perfect, calling her the teacher's pet. Mm-hmm. I was curious what Asuka and Rei's relationship would be like. And honestly, I'm not surprised that Asuka is jealous. Asuka is very jealous of Rei. Right? She's jealous of Rei. And possibly Shinji too. Because they are her competition. They are going to get to go on the missions just as much, if not more, than she will. And Asuka is... They've used Rey as a threat to Asuka. In the last several episodes, they've been like, oh, well, if you can't do it, we'll just have Rey do it. And Asuka's like, no, my whole purpose is to do X, Y, and Z. You can't give that to somebody else. So, I mean, Rey has been established as a competition for Asuka, so no wonder she doesn't think highly of her. But then she just kind of is jealous of her, and she projects a lot of her own insecurities onto kind of talking down both Shinji and Rey. And so then they hear the voice, and at first I thought it was going to be the voice of whoever was trying to infiltrate, but it's the guy with the glasses, Mr. Hyuga. Okay, so Mr. Hyuga, look at him. So Misato's errand boy is Mr. Hyuga. Okay, Hyuga with the glasses. Gotcha. And they try to get his attention. I like that Shinji and Asuka are trying to get his attention, and Rey's just like, an angel is approaching. And they're like, well, crap, we need to go get in the Evas and do something. And if you look, it's pretty much the animation, but Shinji and Asuka have like the exact same face, just different hair. It's just the animation. And then Rey looks different. Yeah, no time to waste. And I like that Asuka's like, I'm the leader, don't just take over. And Rey's like, I don't care. And then, but because Asuka doesn't know, she's like, I want to be the leader, but you know all the stuff, so you tell me. It's like, there's a lot of green in this episode. A lot of green. Like the green background behind Gendo. There is the green of the chute that they're in. There's a lot of the color green. The telephone booth was green. The color green is frequent a lot in this episode. I don't know if there's some kind of color symbolism behind that, but there's green on Shinji's Eva unit, so yeah, we're getting to this question. At this point in the episode, we're over halfway through, and Shinji starts asking these questions. It's kind of like the episode is saying, hey audience, if you're wondering what we're going to be tackling the next several episodes, you might want to pay attention. So it's like, okay. And so Shinji says, what do you suppose, what are the angels? What are they? That's a very great question. We don't know. It connects to Second Impact, but we've established the Second Impact was a man-made thing caused by them fighting the angels. So where did the angels come from? When did they first appear? What's the deal? Was it an experiment gone wrong and they just kind of all left? We don't know. They seem to be counting how many there are. They said this is the 8th one. So is there a certain number that were there? We don't know. But what do you suppose the angels are? And he's like, and I like Asuka's like, why are you spouting out exposition at a time like this? And he says, angels, messengers of God, enemies named after servants of heaven. Okay, so we established that angels, Shinji's like, they're considered messengers of God. Okay. And that they're also established as servants of heaven. Okay. Which makes me think that the Evangelions are tied to the angels because that whole servants of heaven, if NERV has been established to be, they have the motto that's under the door that's like all is right and the Father's in heaven and all that. So that makes me think that the Evas maybe were once angels that have become domesticated or controlled and turned into these servants of NERV, servants of heaven. And I don't know where the messengers of God come in at, but Shinji saying this and Rey listening to him. Why are we fighting them? So yeah. And he's saying why. There has to be a reason why they're attacking us. Why are we fighting them? That's a question too. What's the whole point? Why do they come after us? And then Asuka's like, what are you, stupid? Strange beings are attacking us. So if you're going to go through a fire, you're going to brush away the embers, of course. So yeah, Asuka's just like, they're the bad guys. That's why we're fighting them. Like she does not consider that there may be something more to all of this than just good versus bad, right? And I'm with Shinji. Something's up. So then I do like here that we have our pathways, our fork in the road. Rey chooses left, Asuka chooses right. They ask Shinji what he's going to do, and he's like, I wonder. He doesn't give an answer. He's like, well, I wonder. He doesn't want to choose between them. I feel like if there was ever a love triangle conversation with this, which I honestly don't ship Shinji very much with either of them, but if you were having the love triangle conversation, I could see an audience member in the fandom arguing, well, he went right with Rei or left with Asuka, so that must mean. But by the mangaka and the author or creator choosing for him to not pick either way, it still leaves it ambiguous, right? What a fun answer. And then Asuka's like, shut up, I'm the leader, follow me. I love, she's like, if you can't decide, just come with me. And then, God, the moment that they open up the door and they see the angel and it looks at them and they're like, nope. That part was great. I love that. I love that they just see the angel and they're like, well, we've confirmed it's here. It's creepy as hell. Asuka's reaction was pretty genuine. Creepy as hell. We've confirmed it's here in Tokyo 3. We do need to stop it. That's great. Its visual presence is confirmed. Now we have to hurry. Oh my gosh. And so then, yeah, they show up. The angel's approaching. Eva dispatch will be necessary. And they're like, oh no. And so Fuyutsuki. So Fuyutsuki, that's his name. I like to call him Fuku-chan. Fuyu-chan, but Fuyutsuki. And he's like, I'll leave the Sondri business to you. And he's like, I'll start preparing the Eva for the launch in the cage. And he's like, seriously, manually? And he says, there's an emergency diesel generator. And they're like, but, and he just goes and does it. We have no pilots. But we do. They managed to get through the duct. It's great. And so then this conversation with Asuka, and they start going on there. And here's the thing. Asuka initiates it because of course Asuka does. And so Rei's like, let's go this way. I know what I'm doing. I've got good intuition. Let's just go. And part of me was like, can she sense Gendo? Can she smell him in the air and sense that he's near? But she follows her intuition. And then I've heard your Commander Ikari's favorite. And Rei saying nothing. I love that. I love Rei's expression there. I'm going to take a picture of it. It reminds me a lot of Mikasa from Attack on Titan, oddly enough. But I love that expression where she's just like, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of answering that question. And then Asuka she keeps on poking her with the stick. She says, I guess being Miss Perfect, the teacher's pet, really shows. And Rei, and Shinji's like, can we not? Shinji's like, can we not have an argument? Can we not? But yeah, Asuka has this jealousy. You always get to look all smug. And Rei's like, And Rei is not the person to try to like get a rise out of because it won't work. Rei is just emotionally detached, like does not know how to express feelings. And she's like, do you think being favored means that you can mess with me? And Rei's like, I'm not messing with you. And then I love this line, and I'm not favored either. And she just looks ahead. I know that quite well. Oh, that line is so good. That line from Rei, because yeah, she's like, I'm not favored. She's like, have you seen where I live? Have you seen like my home life? Like, no, it's not. Commander Ikari does not have her put up in a penthouse somewhere with fluffy pillows doting on her every waking minute. No, he does not do that. She lives in a shithole and it's terrifying and you feel like nobody cares about her because nobody's checking in on her. She's not favored. She's not favored because she's not getting to fight in the Evas. She's still getting pushed to the sidelines and Asuka and Shinji are fighting, even though Rei probably wants to do her duty and be of use. She's not being favored. And so Rei's like, no, you may think whatever you want about me, but I don't have it easy. She's like, I know quite well that I'm just kind of here to do whatever they tell me to do. And we don't know anything else about Rei's past to know why she's like that, why she does that. We just know that Rei is there to do whatever they tell her to do and to not question it. She's like, I'm not favored. No. And, oh man, that's such a good line. I love that. To Asuka, just like Rei I was waiting for Rei to snap, but she just doesn't put up with Asuka's shit. She's like, no, I'm not even gonna, like, you're so mature, I'm not toying with you right now. And Asuka's just projecting that jealousy and insecurity that she has onto Rei and Shinji. I mean, somebody was questioning why Asuka is. I mean, she is a tsundere. She is an OG classic tsundere, but she is just projecting all of this insecurity on someone else to kind of mask that she's, Asuka wants to be useful, and so far she's not exactly been able to. The only time was in the last episode she got to kind of be in the spotlight, but Shinji ended up having to save her anyway. So it's interesting. But these guys, them getting the O1 unit up, getting the entry plug out, saying the ejection of the terminal plug is complete. He says, good, prepare to insert the entry plug for all 3 units. And I love that faith that Gendo and Akagi, he's like, they'll show up. I love that. He has faith that they're going to show up. That's great. Because they're not here yet. Akagi's like, they'll come without fail. And so meanwhile, they're like, man, we can't get through here because it's all blocked up. We'll have to break into a duct to get through. Like, Rei's like already thinking of... And I like that Asuka's like, this first child's scary, Shinji. You want to back me up? And Shinji's like, I want no part in this argument. I want to be excluded from this narrative, please. She's the type who will do anything to accomplish her objectives. And I don't think the first part of it is very accurate. Asuka says that Rei will do anything to accomplish the mission. Meaning that she will throw aside emotion, everything to get it done. But Asuka likens that to saying that she's a self-righteous bitch. And I'm like, is she though? No. I don't think Rei is self-righteous. No. I think that Rei I do think that Rei will do anything to accomplish the mission. She's like going to do anything and everything in her power to make the mission happen. But I don't really think it's for self-righteous reasons. I think that Rei just doesn't have anything else in her life. Like Asuka has not heard the words that she's told Shinji. She told Shinji, she's like, I have nothing else except my duty. Like, this is all I got, so I'm going to do it. But Asuka doesn't know that. So Asuka believes that she's just being self-righteous and like almighty or whatever and thinking she's better than other people. And that's not the case at all. All right. And Rei just being like, and we cut from Rei straight to Gendo. And what a great phrasing, right? They do anything to accomplish the mission. We tie that right to Gendo, who is doing anything to accomplish the mission. Even if it's using a backup diesel generator, even if it's doing his son's Eva, who he clearly is disconnected to, anything to destroy the angels and accomplish the mission, Gendo is doing. Okay. Which honestly, that makes me think that Gendo is not involved with whatever shenanigans Kaji is doing. Because, one, Gendo going down and powering the backup generator and doing all of that, if he really wanted them to fail, I don't think he would have been involved in that process. Now, could it be that Gendo suspects Kaji's a double agent and he's just letting Kaji stick around until he gets caught and then Gendo's going to reprimand him? Maybe. We don't know. But the fact of the matter is that Gendo and Rei, according by Asuka's logic, are scary because they're willing to do anything to accomplish the mission. Now, is Gendo a self-righteous bitch? We don't know yet. But I don't think Rei is. No. I think that they get everything manually ready to go for the Evas, and that's pretty much it. Now we just have to wait for the kids. And so then, yeah, we do the army crawl thing. I'm like, you couldn't let Shinji walk in front of you, Asuka. You just couldn't do it, could ya? Nope, our poor boy getting kicked in the face. Oh, this poor boy is just, And then I like that Akagi's like, oh, there they are. You guys, you showed up. And Rei, like, has the perfect landing. She's like, oh, look, y'all made it. It's great. And then, of course, we see Gendo. Of course, at that moment, Gendo looks down and sees his son tangled up in Asuka and Rei just standing there perfectly. Of course, he looks down and sees that. Yep. I fully believe that Gendo would not like Asuka. I think Gendo would have about 2 seconds of Asuka and he would peace right out because he'd be like, nope, can't deal with this. And he's like, all units prepare for entry. And we don't see his eyes there in that one. He's like, I don't want to talk about my kids and all of this. Open the hatches manually. And then I like that Shinji's like, how are the Evas? And he's like, but they don't have power. But nothing's working. And then Akagi has this like soft moment with Shinji where he's like, well, how are they working? And she's like, it was all done by hand, silly boy. it was Commander's idea. And he's like, my father's. And I like that Rei is looking towards Shinji and he's like, oh. And we see Gendo pulling up the plug. And Akagi says, Commander Ikari had faith that you would come and prepared everything. So that part's curious. I feel like Akagi is trying to paint Gendo in a more caring light. I feel like Akagi is trying to say, well, look, Shinji, your dad's not a total prick. He's not the worst person. He came here to get the Eva ready for you. He's pulling on this thing manually. It ties back to when Shinji heard about his father opening the hatch to save Rei and burning his hands. Like that act of kindness that he did, or that act of concern towards Rei, is something that Shinji's like, well, why doesn't my father care about me like he cares about Rei? And so him seeing him doing the thing with the plug is kind of mirroring like, oh, maybe my father does care about me. Maybe he just doesn't know how to communicate. Or like Akagi says, he's bad at living. He's inadept at living. And he doesn't know how to communicate or socially function outside of work. So he's like just designated to somebody else. I'd like to be kind and give Gendo a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and say that maybe he's just really bad at communicating and really bad at understanding what to do. And so he designates all of the non-business matters to someone else, and he doesn't know how to function as a father or in the real world. That would be my kind way of saying it, and that he's not the worst person ever. So I do like that Akagi tries to make Shinji feel a little bit better about being Gendo's son in that moment. And so then, yeah, we get the whole thing ready with the pod and everything, with the entry plug. They manually, using the generator, they manually suck that thing in with all of them. They do that with all 3 Evas. Release the primary bolts. Yep. And they release that. They basically get rid of the supports, so they got 5 minutes. Hydraulics lock. Yep. 0 pressure. Yep. The situation's free. And each unit force their strengths under your own power. And head out. Okay, and we actually get to see the 3 Eva units working together as a unit. And so this is really cool, getting to see them work together as a pair and as a trio and seeing them in action. And of course, Asuka's like, yes, as they go through the town, and there's the angel and all the abandoned cars. I love that the one guy, old Hyuga is like trying to report that they're there, and then everybody's like, okay, go. We can do this and launch. And then they crawl back through the space the way they came. The humor of Evangelion, it's so on the nose and just ridiculous. I'm like, okay, fair enough. It's so not glamorous. But yeah, so then the angel, it's very much the tears, the acid tears, remind me a lot of the drill of the pyramid, the drill that was trying to get to the center of NERV. So that's interesting. These angels keep coming towards the center of NERV. Are they after the atom specimen? Are they after it? But they were coming to NERV before the atom specimen was even there, so I don't know. But the whole thing of it using the acid from its eyes is very reminiscent of the drill that the pyramid had to try to break through NERV. Okay. And so then, yeah, but it went to where the Evas were. So maybe it's attracted to the Evas. If it's attracted to the Evas, that would make a lot of sense, because it's funny that these angels keep going to Tokyo 3 where the Evas are and not really anywhere else. So that part is curious. I want to get a picture of its eye. Its creepy eye. Ugh. But yeah, so I really like this design of this angel a lot. And it just like using the acid to burrow through. And so they have this great plan. They're like, okay, somebody's going to create a defense mechanism, a defense barrier, and just get the acid on them. Somebody's going to go down and get the gun, and the other person is going to throw it back up and fire the gun at the angel, and we'll work as a trio. It'll be great. We can do this. And so originally, Rei is the one that wants to be the defense, but Asuka's like, no, you're going to go get the gun. you're going to go get the gun. I'm going to be the one that's on defense. And Shinji's like, that's going to hurt you. And she's like, no, I owe you from last time. You protected me, now I'm going to protect you. So we'll be even. I'm like, let this tsundere be even. Just let her do it, Shinji. And so they do, and it works out really good. I like it a lot. I like that. And Asuka tells Rei to do it, and Rei doesn't question her. And I forgot, honestly, going into this scene, I forgot that whatever happens to the EVA unit, they feel that. It's like phantom limb syndrome, but they feel it, right? So that acid falling on her back, like she feels every moment of that. That's terrifying, right? I also like Shinji's little nod of him being like, okay, let's do this. I like his little nod when she's like, okay, Rei, defense, Shinji, get the gun. Can you do this? And he's like, yeah, I can do it. Like the first semblance of teamwork between all three of them in this episode. Okay, sure thing. We can do it. And she's like, Gehen! Like, going on, like, speaking her German. And then they go down and get it. Awesome. And yeah, and she's just in pain, but then Shinji gets the gun and manages to fire it on there and destroy the angel. Yep. And she's like, now we're even. And I like that he's like, and I like Shinji has a little smile. He's like, all right, that's so nice. So I do like that despite everything, Shinji and Asuka, they do have this friendship that is developing. Now, Asuka and Rei still have quite a bit of animosity towards one another, but her and Shinji, they're both like, we're on equal terms, you and I. We can be friends, even though Asuka's gonna be tsundere and say that Shinji nags too much. So then we cut to Misato. She's like, hey, you, Kaji, let me stand on your shoulders and I'll try to figure this all out. Because she's a take-charge woman and she wants to figure it out herself. Which also means that Kaji was not offering to figure it out, which is suspicious. And then, of course, he's looking up and she's like, it's an emergency. I gotta go do this. But then she tells him, she's like, put your head down. Don't you look up. It's like, wow, Kaji, amazing. And then the power comes on and he's like, oh. And then, of course, they fall on each other right as the elevator opens. And there we are. Wow. And I just love the girl Akagi's like, are you serious? And the girl's like, disgusting. And it's the one time Misato's actually not doing, I'm just waiting for Misato to go to Akagi later and be like, it's not what you think. It's not. I wasn't doing anything with him. Please believe me. Oh my gosh. And so then they have the conversation under the stars. And there's the line, it's ironic that the stars are so beautiful when there's no electricity or artificial lights. So it's interesting here. They have this conversation about the stars and about the beauty of the world. So the idea of the beauty of the world that is untouched by man, right? So that when it's not distracted or untouched by man, it's beautiful and you can be in awe of it. But then they say, but without the lights, it doesn't feel like anyone lives here. It feels alone. So there's this contrast between the beauty and then the isolation and loneliness of that beauty. That without people there, without a sign of human life, even though this area is beautiful, it feels lonely and perhaps empty, right? And then the lights all start coming back on throughout the city. And Asuka says, oh, but look, like, see, now I feel much more comfortable. And that ties to the idea that humanity, her saying that she feels more comfortable, humanity, it goes back, there's themes of this in Attack on Titan, there's themes of this in other shows, that we are pack animals. We are meant to be with others. That we're meant to be with others. My best friend recently, her father passed, and she was talking to me the other day, and we've been seeing, like, just checking in on each other, and she was like, I thought that I wanted to be alone when he passed. And she's like, but I realized I don't want to. I want somebody else there. And I want that human connection there. I feel better when there's someone else there that I'm comfortable around. And so I feel like that ties to this whole thing, is that, yeah, the world is beautiful and maybe beautiful, but we ourselves as humans, we want to be with others. We don't want to be isolated or alone. right? We feel more comfortable when we're with others, even if it's artificial, right? So even if it's not real, even if it's artificial, we still want that connection. And that kind of relates back to Misato, like why she keeps going back to Kaji. She's like, I know he's no good for me. I know that whatever this relationship between us is, it's artificial. It's not the real deal. She's like, but I keep going back because I don't want to be lonely, because I'd rather be with him than by myself. And it's like, and that's a relatable feeling, right? And so we cut to Rei in this moment where she says, man has always feared the darkness, carving away at it with fire. Meaning that we don't want the darkness of being alone. And I love that, carving away with fire. So we'll light fires to keep it away. And that's the thing. That line, carve away with fire, it's destruction. Like, people will cause destruction and ruin, but it's just to escape the darkness and to escape that isolation. Right? And so I like this. Asuka's like, oh, you're being so philosophical, huh? And then Shinji says, is that what makes mankind a special species? Okay, so then Shinji asks, is that, I want to get this right, what makes mankind a special species? Is that what makes mankind? This ability to resist the darkness and seek the company of others. Is that what makes them special? Right? And I like is that why the angels keep attacking us? I was just thinking, is that why the angels attack? Because yeah, so far, these angels have been by themselves. There's been several of them, but they've not been like, you would think that if the angels were, you would think if this collective of angels had some sense of intelligence or some sense of thought processes, that they all gather together and just attack as a unit. Because yeah, why they've all attacked one by one. And the argument could be that they all, if they come in from little eggs, like in the last episode, maybe they all just hatch individually. Maybe they're all coming to Tokyo 3 to gather, and it's just they're coming at different times so that Tokyo 3 can battle them and fend them off before they all gather. But you would think, you're like, why wouldn't the angels all come at once? But if they're isolated, maybe one of the reasons they're coming to land and coming towards mankind is because they sense that there's a group of people there. There's a population. And they're like, I'm by myself. I don't want to be. And the angels are coming towards where there's more people there. I don't know. But I like that. Do the angels attack mankind because they're special and this is how they view things, and it's different than the angels, or it's what the angels want? I don't know. The angels are so curious because you don't know if they're really sentient or if they're really intelligent or if they're just like base instinct. We don't know enough yet about them. But these questions, why are the angels attacking us? What are they? What's the deal with them? What makes mankind special and perhaps a target? Like, I feel like this episode was like, here's the questions you need to keep in the back of your head for the rest of the series. I'm like, okay. And then Asuka's like, what are you, stupid? There's no way to know that. How could we know? That's so curious. Oh my gosh. So yeah, lots of questions. I feel like this episode was not as much. It was kind of character development between Asuka and Rei and Shinji. It was the first time we've seen the three of them fight together. And we're nearly halfway through the season. That's the crazy part. It took us 11 episodes out of a 26 episode series to get to the part where they're fighting together. Okay. But I like the pacing of this show in that it did its part in showing us we had to first meet Shinji and Rei, get enough with their characters established, get enough with the world building, and then we needed to meet Asuka, and it's taken 3 full episodes with Asuka to be like, okay, here's this girl's deal. And now we're like, okay, now we can put all of them together and have them work as a unit and start to explore these other questions that we've put on the back burner, setting up our characters. So I like that. I like that Neon Genesis was like, let's set up the characters first. Okay, now that we've done that, we're going to expand on the relationships, dive into this world building, the whole thing with the government, and also ask these questions about the angels that we've probably had in the back of our mind this entire time. So, that's awesome. I really liked this episode a lot. It was really good. I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below, what you guys thought of this episode as well. This was a nice episode. Very getting back on track with the plot and action and the sci-fi. So I'm curious to see where it's going to go from here. So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 12 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Bye.